And basically what he said was that, look, I was part of the KGB apparatus. I know what the plan is for America. We talked about it. He wasn't part of the planning group, but he knew what it was. He was inner circle stuff.
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of United States society.
This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth. We're here in Hartford, Connecticut at the 3rd Annual Red Pill Expo, and I'm joined by the one and only G. Edward Griffin. Now, first of all, fantastic event. We just wrapped up. I got a lot of good videos coming soon, so stay tuned for those. But I wanted to ask you, I've always wanted to be asking you this question. There was an interview that you did a while back with a man named Yuri Bezmenov. Now, I've always wanted to hear the story of how that interview came about and how relevant are the things that he was saying in that interview today.
Well, first of all, yes, I did that interview. I've forgotten the date, but I think it was in the 70s sometime. Yuri Bezmenov was a defector, a KGB defector, coming out of the Soviet Union in those days at great risk to his life, because defectors were usually hunted down and brutally killed. Not just killed, but brutally killed, because they wanted to set precedent, a warning to all the other agents. Hey, if you're thinking about doing this, this is not a smart thing to do. So he did it, and it's an interesting story in itself, but we don't have time for that. But he made it to the U.S., and I had heard about him. I saw a little article in the newspaper, and I thought, this is a guy I ought to interview if I can catch him and find him. Well, I did find him, and he was more than willing to be interviewed. So I set it up, and what he told us at that time seemed so far out about what might happen to America. But now, everything he predicted is right today's news. And basically what he said was that, look, I was part of the KGB apparatus. I know what the plan is for America. We talked about it. He wasn't part of the planning group, but he knew what it was. He was inner circle stuff. And his job, by the way, an interesting job, was to hoodwink Western journalists who traveled to Russia. They would land in Moscow. He'd meet them at the airport, take them out to buy them lunch and get them drunk, and then take them the next day when they're a little bit wobbly and give them a tour of Moscow and show them only the places that they were supposed to see, show them all phony stuff, like a marriage. They said, you heard, in America they don't think we have weddings in churches? Well, here's the one going on now. And they go down, there's a wedding. Well, it's the same groom and the same bride. They get married every time there's a new journalist comes into town. They have a new party. The same guests go there and drink champagne. The same priest shows up and everything. And it's a show. And he told about this. He said, well, it's easy to fool Westerners because they want to be fooled. They want to believe. They don't want an enemy, so they want to believe these good things. That's an aside story. So this is Yuri. And then he said, look, I know. He said, I came to America because I thought it was the last bastion of freedom. He said, I wanted to be free. He said, now that I'm here, I said, oh my gosh, it's happening here. He said, I see the strategy that we had planned for America is already far advanced. He said, I didn't know that it was actually that far advanced in America. And then he spelled it out. He said, this is what will happen. Your youth will be weaned away from your traditions. We'll make sure that we take over the school system. We have people who are sympathetic to our point of view embedded in the school system, in the media, in key agencies in the government, in the tax-exempt foundations, everywhere. He said, this is how we will do it. And Americans won't even know what's happening because it'll be done to them by people who are American citizens. They're not going to be done by Russians or Chinese. It'll be done by Americans and their citizens. And he said, and this is how it'll happen. And he described the stages and all the way down to the final stage when it's a mop-up and when they start killing people. And he was very frank about it, and everybody looked at that at the time, and some people, like myself, took it very seriously, but a lot of people said, oh, come on, who is this guy? Well, now you look at this video, which is, 50 years old almost, is it? And 40 years old. And everything he said, you can see it in your daily newspaper today. So you ask me, is it relevant? Is it ever? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like he said you could literally change a nation with a certain amount of generations by taking over the education system, essentially, right? And I think it's that collective mindset that is important, and perhaps that's what the universities are doing today. And is it possible, though, to reverse or to use the same tactics, that he spoke of on our side of the thing, to reverse this back into something beneficial for us?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's possible to use some of the tactics, but not all of them, because some of the tactics are brilliant. In other words, they recognize the herd instinct that humans have, and so their tactics include providing leaders for the herd. They always try and put their agents, posing as good, patriotic people, anti-communist sometimes they pretend to be, but they put their people into positions of leadership in organizations. And that's brilliant when you think of it. And the followers just say, oh, he's a nice guy, and I'll vote for him. And he says he's an anti-communist, so I trust him, What they don't know is that that's what they're taught to say. But putting people into positions of leadership in organization, nothing unethical about that. But the unethical side is when you lie about what you believe in and what you're trying to do. We could never follow that tactic, you say. So the answer is yes and no. For us to do something like that, I think we should be concerned about leadership in all the power centers of society, political parties and government and so forth, media. But we cannot use deception and pretend to be something that we're not.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think there's so much to be learned from that particular interview. In fact, I'm going to leave a link in the description below for anybody who has not seen it, because groundbreaking stuff. And had you not have gotten that on the record, people might not be aware of what's coming down the pipe, not only for America, but this seems to be a tactic that they're using all over the world. So, groundbreaking.
It's global strategy, and it's right out of the Soviet handbook. I mean, they've written books on it. And, Stalin did a lot of writing, and Lenin, of course, laid it all out. I'm probably one of the few non-communists that have read, I think, all the works of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. And he's a very prolific writer, and he's very frank about what he says, He says, promises are like pie crusts made to be broken, And, oh, that's interesting. And then he said, words are one thing, actions another. And he's very frank about it. He said, the Americans in the Western world will be fooled. They're suckers. They'll go for anything, as long as they think it's going to be less of a struggle. They don't like struggle, so promise peace, and then they'll cooperate. This is Lenin, and so. Yeah, it's actually happening, and it's no mystery. It's because it's not hidden. If you're willing to research and see what these people really believe and say.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're taking a page right out of the Edward Bernays' 1928 propaganda, which really explained how you can manipulate the very ideas and opinions of the masses, and it's largely done by men who you've never seen or heard of. And so groundbreaking stuff. Really glad you got that on the record. I want to encourage everybody to check it out if you haven't seen it before. A lot of people in this movement have seen that, and they don't realize that you were the one behind the camera doing the interview. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And I would say if you have trouble finding it, if they take it down from YouTube or something, which they tend to be doing, we're opening up a new service for this kind of thing. So at any rate, look us up at redpilluniversity.org, and we're just beginning to build our archives now. And in fact, all of the episodes from our Red Pill Expo here will be in the archive. So people who want to come in as students will be able to watch all this great stuff just for being a student.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm really excited about Red Pill University as well, especially moving forward in this time of censorship and how they're silencing voices such as mine, for example. Excellent solution-orientated stuff. Red Pill University, check it out. Links will also be located to that in the description below. Once again, thanks for talking to us.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you. Bye.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.